In the deepest, darkest corners of space lurks a terrifying stalker. With unnatural speed and brutal cunning, it hunts its prey. This enigmatic and terrifying monster is the bane of any space traveler. Nay, it is their doom. With a strange physiology, the Xenomorph has a dark carapace covering its entire body. This carapace grows in such a manner as to resemble the inner workings of most spacefaring vessels, leading many to believe that this beast's evolutionary path, or perhaps engineered physiology, has been specifically adapted to the interior of spaceships. This natural camouflage makes the Xenomorph a particularly tricky foe to face, as one may never know where it hides unless it gives itself away with its movement. A weird creature with protruding tube-like head, the Xenomorph has no eyes or any perceivable way of detecting the world around it, save for its tactile senses. However, it responds to objects beyond its tactile range, as well as seemingly able to detect visible light. This makes anticipating its movement particularly tricky, as one can never know where this beast's focus lies. With powerful limbs and scythe-like tail, this creature is more than able to defend itself in a physical confrontation. Indeed, not even the vacuum of space can easily defeat this creature, as it is well adapted to survive in that most unlivable environment. Its only weakness appears to be fire. However, harming the creature comes at great risk. Its blood is so corrosive that it can disintegrate even the densest of materials in great volume. Its teeth are like steel, and if this were not enough, this frightening creature has a secondary set of retractable jaws within its first set, an adaptation that makes this creature decidedly alien. If these features were not terrifying enough, this monster has one final feature that renders it the bane and terror of our spacefaring civilization. The Xenomorph uses parasitic embryo infutosis to implant its offspring into unwilling travelers, thereby allowing our own people to become a vector for the spread of this beast as it erupts horrifically from their chests. So utterly lethal and yet fascinating, there are those who wish to learn more about this terrible creature, while others, less scrupulous amongst us, see it as a tool rather than the threat it truly is. With our varied stance to this creature, and inability to readily exterminate it, and its awful reproductive cycle, this terror from outer space has become perhaps the single greatest threat humanity has faced, and who knows whether this will prove to be our great filtering point. No discussion about the Xenomorph can begin without acknowledging its enigmatic creator, Swedish Hans Rudé Giger. Famous for his creation of the art style known as biomechanical, Giger would take inspiration from the uniform surfaces and structures that we find in manufactured objects and combine them with the soft edges usually found in biological structures in order to create disturbing and fascinating works of art. It was from this inspired mind that we find the progenitor of the Xenomorph in a collection of prints published by Giger himself known as the Necronomicon. The image itself, known as the Necronom 4, was the basis of the Xenomorph, and has been altered very little from the horror icon we know today. Of course, it wasn't solely through this artwork that the Xenomorph drew its inspiration. Of equal importance was the mind of one of the creators of the original Alien film, a man by the name of Dan O'Bannon. O'Bannon had met Giger while working on the ill-fated film adaptation of Dune by the renowned film director Alejandro Jodorowsky. O'Bannon is responsible for the overall sexual overtones of the Xenomorph, having literally dreamed up the reproductive cycle of the creature during a period where he and his co-creator Ronald Shusett were trying to brainstorm the narrative reason for their yet undeveloped science fiction monster and how it could naturally find its way onto a spaceship. From this moment, the core concept of the Xenomorph was completed, a parasitic space monster that reproduced by infesting its prey with its own progeny. While there were still details to be worked out, such as the infamous facehugger and egg pod phases of the Xenomorph's life cycle, the creature was essentially complete. Subsequent films and adaptations have expanded on the creature to a significant degree. Moreover, we cannot forget the contributions of the legendary film director James Cameron, whose pitch for the famous sequel consisted of turning the S in Aliens into a $sign while it was displayed on a whiteboard. Ultimately, the Xenomorph would develop a eusocial characteristic, with an entire caste system complete with a queen, to complement its already horrific nature, Moreover, it would develop into a more lithe and phallic beast, gaining a rudder-like tail for swimming, as well as the ability to change its gross physical features depending on the host it was implanted in. Of course, with such a long and unique development, it's not surprising to see that this creature has had a profound impact on culture. This iconic design and myth have become an essential consideration whenever detailing classic horror or science fiction concepts. And it could easily be said that one is not entirely cultured if they have not experienced at least the first 2 films of this franchise, such as the weight and meaningfulness of this creature. At last we come to our current cultural climate, where the popularity of this creature is incredibly profound. Born in part from mad genius, necessity, and quite a lot of creativity, it is certain that this horror icon will descend into the collective annals of human myth, alongside such creatures as the Jersey Devil and Zombie. The Xenomorph, despite having been created seemingly sporadically and justified post hoc, is nevertheless surprisingly authentic in its depiction of a living creature. Its life cycle is generally reminiscent of most parasites, and its physiology, despite being weird and essentially alien, is seemingly within the bounds of reality. Initially, although rare, a bipedal form is quite possible, as we know from our own evolution. Although the long arms this creature possesses does seem to leave it off balance somewhat, it is not at all unreasonable, as these proportions are based on a real human being, namely the actor who played the Xenomorph, Nigerian-born Balahi Badeho. Considering the skin of the Xenomorph, although the sleek, black substance does appear to be quite strange, it is still well within real biology. The second most common polysaccharide, next to cellulose, is chitin. This substance is quite hardy and most often found making up the exoskeleton of insects and the shells of crabs and lobsters. Although slightly heavier than gold when compared by volume and thus providing diminishing returns of strength to weight when a creature grows in size, it is still quite a useful substance with which to cover the alien, making it hardy to most external factors that would otherwise harm the creature. Already, with these 2 aspects of the Xenomorph discussed, we have something that quite easily resembles the terrific film monster. We could even go so far as to explain the strange head elongation as being host to specialized sensory neural tissue or housing other sensory organs. On this note, it has been shown that the Xenomorph does respond to light without actually possessing structures that we would readily define as eyes. Moreover, the Xenomorph turns its head to whatever interests it, letting us know that whatever sensory organs it does possess must be located in its head. With this in mind, it would not be unreasonable to explain that this elongation forms the central structure to a complex and sensitive electroperceptive organ. A trait most famous in sharks, electroperception allows a creature to sense its surroundings based on the way nearby objects respond electrically. While sharks use a passive system allocated across the breadth of their jaw, other animals such as the elephant fish are able to produce their own electrical fields for this purpose. A special organ in the elephant fish's tail produces a charge, and the skin of the animal then perceives changes in that charge. These charge patterns can also be complicated and intricate, even following a sinusoidal pattern. This large structure would naturally lead to a powerful electroperceptive ability, although there is very little information regarding these organs, such as how their size might relate to their accuracy, but it is possible that this ability is what allows the creature to function so well in the artificial environment of a spaceship. Another important aspect of the Xenomorph is its corrosive blood. Initially invented as a way to explain why the characters don't outright kill the monster in the film, it is perhaps the most difficult aspect to explain. We see that this blood is able to destroy several layers of starship flooring, and there is concern that it might damage the hull. Not only that, but the blood does this relatively rapidly. Alas, there exists no such material that behaves in this manner at temperatures and environmental conditions as what we observe in the film. While we could justify the creature being resistant to its own blood via a complicated interspersal of mucus or other corrosive-resistant biofilm throughout its body, we would again run into the problem of no chemical actually behaving in this manner. A small possibility exists in that the blood may not be corrosive at all, and rather contain bacteria that rapidly digest material outside of the Xenomorph's body, perhaps even the creature's own immune cells. This has the advantage of making the creature eminently adaptable to almost any environment, while also adding credence to the idea that it might be an artificially engineered entity. But again, we run into the issues of thermodynamics when we try to match the film to reality. The final aspect of the Xenomorph, and perhaps most iconic, is its reproductive cycle. Although developed to justify how the creature gets on board the ship, the cycle resembles those of parasites we find here on Earth. Parasites will often lay eggs in host animals. The host then must endure the gestation as well as, for want of a better word, horrific birthing process of those parasites. Indeed, considering the fact that most fungi and insects employ this kind of embryonic parasitism, as can be seen in various wasp species, as well as the fact that the Xenomorph possesses chitin as its shell, might indicate that it is somewhat related to insects. By using corrosive fluid, perhaps even the immune system cocktail mentioned before, it would be simple enough for a xenomorph not only to grow rapidly within a host, but also weaken the host's body sufficiently to make a dramatic, explosive birth, for which the film is famous. This would be especially useful as the xenomorph physiology may have to adapt to different levels of strength regarding its potentially varied alien hosts. However, the alterations in physiology based upon the nature of the host is not yet known to be possible. While it has been speculated that some multicellular animals may be able to steal genetic information from others, this is not yet confirmed, but may be possible for an alien species or artificial one. At last, it is surprising that this creature developed entirely for the purpose of satisfying its role as a monster in film is quite feasible. Many aspects are well within the realms of possibility, and while we may not encounter something like it in the far-flung future, there is little doubt that we may have to contend with some sort of analog, as well as slowly and graspingly reach towards the stars. This is at once thrilling but also terrifying, for, as we all know, in space, no one can hear you scream.